I'm Kathrina Miccio, and you're watching Indie Film Cafe, where I'll bring you up close and personal into the lives of creatives who have passion for the arts, their craft, and will share it with you. Hi, I'm Kathrina Miccio with Indie Film Cafe, and I'm here at Armand Assante's house. I am so honored to introduce this actor for over 4 decades has shared his talents with worldwide audiences, and Emmy Award winning Armand Assante. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about your background, okay? A little bit of your background and the importance of education.
I think it began with certainly my Italian grandfather and my mother's parents, because they were immigrants, and as well as that it was a very difficult time in America, and they understood and saw visibly the importance of education. So I will say my grandfather, I think he put all of his sons and his daughter through great schools. So it was a big, tremendous burden on him. But he stressed that to me when I was a very young actor. I mean, literally in my teens. He would always say, get your education, get your education.
Your education.
So he was very serious about it.
And what part of Italy?
Naples.
From Naples.
From the port of Naples.
The port, yeah.
Porto di Napoli.
Porto di Napoli. That's, yep, my background. So, and your father was a painter, yeah? And I've seen some of the paintings around your house. They're amazing.
He was very talented, my father. He was, my mother was critically ill when I was born for many years. She had polio the night I was born. So my father had to, in a way, give up his dreams of being a painter and support his family. So he was very successful in advertising and did that for many years. And he painted as much as he could. But with my mother in the situation she was in for many years, it was pretty much on his shoulders. So he didn't have the recreation that he had normally had.
So he started after he retired?
Yeah, whenever he could paint, he would.
He did.
But he painted his whole life, since he was a boy, actually.
And your mom was a music teacher, so they were both very, very creative. So
my mother was a musician as well as a published poet.
Wow.
So she wrote a lot, and I think I was blessed in that I grew up in a household that was I was given permission. I was given permission to express myself how I wanted to express myself.
Yeah.
And my parents never put too many parameters around me, and it was a blessing. And I think they also trusted in their own creativity, that creativity can't hurt you. So it was a blessing for my life, and for my sisters as well. We were given tremendous creative freedom to paint, draw, sculpt, make pots. I was a professional drummer by the time I was 15, a singer. I mean, so I grew up in that world where I was. I tell you, I had no interest in certainly my generation's incredible indulgences, because I was working at such an early age. I never got into anything destructive because I had to work. So I was very blessed in a way that they believed in their children that much, you know. But they guided us. But it's very powerful when a parent trusts a child to find his way. And I think my parents had that. And I'm always grateful to this day that they had that belief in us.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, my father never understood what I was doing. I went to art school, and he's like, what are you doing? You know, what are you going to do with drawing naked people? You know? Yeah. So he didn't get it. So it was just a bit of a struggle for me. You're so lucky, but that both of your parents really gave you that freedom. That's really, so when you said that you wanted to act, it was like, of course you did.
It was kind of a process. I mean, I always supported myself with my music, or if I had to get a job, I got a job. But the thing is, when I went to become an actor, you know, I entered an academy, and I was very blessed in that school, and they also gave me a lot of creative freedom to work. So I will say, without that trust that people had in me, I don't know if I would be the same person. Very important, you know, to allow a person to grow and find their way and find their own process, find their pace. You know, I look at the world today and I think it's unfair in a lot of ways for young people because they're not given a chance to pace themselves. Too many expectations of them to produce art or music or performance overnight, and it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
And I think in the years that I was forming, I was able to obtain a process for myself and stick to it. And it's a big task, and I see young people today, a lot of them get very depressed or withdraw, or they feel that they don't have the self-esteem. That's because of the lack of process. They've not been given a chance to develop at the pace they should be developing. There's too much expectation. I think that's very unfair, and unfortunately, it's a big part of the environment we're living in today.
I think it's a lot of the falseness that's on the internet too, as far as, you know, you go on an app and you could completely change the way you look to like be this completely perfect person. So they're looking at these fake things and, you know, expecting, and because this person that looks like this is not even real,
right.
But they have, you know, millions of hits or something. So,
why
can't I be that? Yeah.
Useless information.
Useless.
Anyway.
But yeah, and all they have to do is Google whatever they're looking for, so they don't have to be creative as much.
My parents were under a lot of, I think, interior pressure because of my mother being so ill when I was born. And I think that, in a way, what happened in our family is that there was such incredible souls in themselves. I mean, really, they were very, very creative people. And the thing is that I think the principal thing that I learned is that you have only so much time in your life to feed your soul. So that was a big deal for me. Big deal. It's the one thing I remember.
As an artist, that really touches.
Yeah.
You know, that goes deep. That's a very, very powerful
idea.
Yes, it's a very powerful idea. Wow. So you did your own fair share of regional theater at a young age, yeah?
Yeah. I was 10 years in the theater before I made a film. I was also in off-Broadway, Broadway, a myriad of workshops, working with different playwrights and stuff, bouncing around Manhattan all the time. But I did a lot of regional theater. In fact, I worked every regional theater on the East Coast. So I did a lot of plays, and I think that's where I found my foundation as an actor, was in the theater. And to me, I mean, anything I do today, even if I perform in whatever I'm doing, I mean, everything is theater, you know. People, they ask what's the difference between film and theater, and to me, there's no difference. To me, film only works if it's based on emotional energy. Emotional energy is theatrical energy. So, I mean, you can't get away from it. But I mean, everything I do in terms of prepping my work is based in the theater. It's as if I was going to do it on stage. And I think without that understanding that you still have to convey an idea a far, far, far away, it helps.
Wow. I know it's very different to project it to an audience versus now the camera is like right here. So you have to take it back a bit, right?
Yeah, but in a sense, emotion is emotion. And emotion, I think, will connect a long, long way.
Yeah.
But I think even in film, you have to get to that whatever it is, that place inside you that conveys what you have to convey. It's the same, I mean, perhaps in the theater you would just adrenalize that a little more so it gets, you know, to the 250th row. But the point is that it comes from the same place.
And I think that it's become less important for actors, I mean, for casting directors. I remember when I first started acting like 20 years ago, they were like, well, what Broadway have you done? I don't think that they're not even concerned about that anymore.
It's a different world in a way. I've sometimes been asked to monitor classes, and I remember one class that I was monitoring an extremely talented group of actors. I mean, it was like being at the studio. These kids were very well taught, very well educated by the teacher, whom I know personally. But anyway, they came in, two students came in and delivered an amazing scene. And I thought, wow, they must have worked that out in the theater for a long time. I watched it and I was like, wow, what a beautiful piece of work. So I said to them at the end of it, I said, what play is that from? And they mentioned this very popular film. I had no idea that they had taken what they had watched on screen and personalized it, translated it for themselves, and then did it as a play, you know? And the thing is, I said, that's phenomenal. But I said, for tomorrow, take the same energy that you brought to that, come in and do a poem of maybe 10 words out of you, let it come from you, and let's see that. Because here's the thing, it's very convenient to imitate something. It's already there. If you listen to it enough, you can imitate a voice. You know what I'm saying? But I found that basically they were doing an impersonation of something that was already a finished product, a product no less. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, in a way, I admired them for what they brought to it, but at the same time, I thought, for me as somebody monitoring their work, I would say, come in and do a poem, let it come from you. Don't imitate anybody. Let that, whatever you have emotionally to bring to this class, let it come from you. Because I think, like you said, if you're going to deny people the creative process and you're not going to nurture people in a theater where they should be nurtured as actors, if you're going to ignore that process, then at least create one. Create one for them, you know? So I mean, it's a very interesting dilemma, because I find, I see a lot of young actors, I work with a lot of young actors, and I see the one thing continually that I notice is they're not used to a theatrical energy. They're not used to a performing energy. So a lot of people think that if I'm casual, it will render itself. And I see a lot of young performers, and it's like, had they only spent a few years on a stage, how much more magical they would be in front of a camera. You know? It is a reality.
It's a big difference.
Yeah.
A lot of people
Fascinating
think,
to watch.
well, yeah, just be myself, and you know, everybody said I could be an actor, blah blah blah. But it does make a big difference, and I could see when somebody has a theatrical background. Absolutely, yeah, it's very apparent. So this career of yours has taken you all over the world.
By choice.
By choice.
By choice.
And by looking at your house, it looks like you've collected an abundance of amazing artifacts and amazing things from all over the world.
I spent a lot of my life all over the world. Yeah. And there was a period of my life where I really wanted to do that. And I was very blessed in that I had some films that connected on an international level, and I was able to attend film festivals, and I met a lot of people who had their own companies in different countries. And there came a time when I reached out to work everywhere, and I did. and I spent probably close to 20 years abroad. I think it had I don't know, I would say it had a positive effect on my commercial career in the States. It completely pulled me away from that. But at the same time, I worked in some amazing films and with very, very creative directors. So I mean, from a creative standpoint, it was a journey, phenomenal journey.
Standpoint.
Yeah. And the journey, I don't regret one bit. I know it affected my career, but I don't regret the journey that I had. I can't replace that.
No, you can't.
And I could never replace the amazing people I work with. It was very powerful.
From just experiencing and getting to know all these people from all different cultures
But also people that came from themselves tremendous literary backgrounds, film backgrounds, theater and musical backgrounds. So it was a real kind of an honor to be able to enter that in different countries. And it is a completely different world out there.
Yeah, what was the name of that movie that you did in New Orleans? What was the one that you did in New Orleans in the bayou?
I did a film for Robert Redford at Sundance. It was the first independent film I ever did, called Bellazaire, and he was very much behind that. And that was my first real experience with guerrilla filmmaking, you know. And that was in the 80s, in 1985, 1984 and 85. And it was a very great experience for me because it was really like being back in the theater. It was really taking things in a very raw and really creative way and creating life out of an idea with an amazing group of people from the Cajun area outside of New Orleans.
Yeah, their culture is...
Yeah, what's called the Atchafalaya Basin. Phenomenal, very God, family, land people, for real. And that had a great effect on me because after doing that film, I was not intimidated by going out and doing independent film, which independent film in this day and age can be scarier than ever because there's that, the difference is that the economic level now has changed drastically. And especially now, people are not investing in what they did. They simply do not invest a lot of money in film unless it's a stream project like a Netflix or Amazon or Roku, whoever. My point is that the economic base foundation is no longer there. So I mean, then there wasn't much there, but there was enough to do a production. But I learned the rudiments of doing independent film, and it was a phenomenal journey. And I don't think that Robert Redford has ever been given the real credit that he deserves for creating Sundance, because it's had a global impact all over the world. And he really pushed actors, directors, writers, and producers and technicians to really pick themselves up by the bootstraps and learn to make your own films. And it's a remarkable accomplishment that he did that alone. But it had a global impact, not just an impact here in the US. That was a global impact. So very important what that contribution was. It's ironic that Sundance now is it's like the Cannes Film Festival, and it's just mob of people. But in fact, then it was a group, a very small group of people, very intimate, guiding experience where you had amazing writers and directors that would come in and just really sit around the table and work on a problem, in a script or in a production, and really hash it out. So that was a very, very important time in my life. And again, I think that experience was in a way powerful enough to drive me all over the world, because I worked on a lot of independent projects.
So when you play a character like Gatti or Napoleon, What was the process of research that that you go through to play a real person?
Well, in the instance of something like Napoleon, I had played it in the theater, in a very interesting play. So when I had done it in the theater, I had probably read over 50 books on his life, and I really understood historically the dilemmas of his life. I will say that the project was shot that I did very, very fast, and was really almost a Valentine portrayal of his relationship with his Josephine. But the core of the character, I always wanted to explore much further because his life was much more complex over a lot of issues. But I doubt that too many people would take it on, because the period in which he lived is probably the most complex aspect of European history. And the dilemmas that he was facing constantly were not simple issues at all. So to render that on screen, you would have to have a writer and director devoted solely to the life of Napoleon. That's almost impossible. But it was a great experience in a way for me to have, because it's, if you will, I mean, he's almost very much a Shakespearean character in that he had the ambition of Macbeth, he had the indecision of Hamlet, he had the Machiavellianism of Richard III, he had the jealousy of the tyrants of Othello, and the mind of a Julius Caesar. So in a sense, he's quintessential Shakespeare in a lot of ways. And it's an incredible opportunity to play a character that dimensionalized, you know. But in the case of Gatti, I didn't know too much about his life. I studied a lot about his life. I only met 2 people that knew him personally, but you have to study in a way the history of the Colombo Wars, who all these figures were to each other. But you know what I say, a lot of people don't quite grasp what I mean, but to me, that Gatti project was about relationships. So I got to know Gatti through the relationships that he had, very important relationships in his life, very singular relationships, very different. But the point is, I got to know Gatti through the people in his life. They, in a way, mirrored to me who he was. That's super important, because I think that's that's a process you find in life. We find often, I mean, I say to my children as much as I say to everyone, especially making a film, you are as good as you are who you're surrounded with. You know what I mean? And I think certainly on the meteoric rise of Gatti in New York, he was surrounded by some very heavyweight people. So I mean, in his life, in the mob, it was, he was tutored by the brightest of the mob, and the smartest, and the toughest. So in a way, I think that made him who he was, so to speak.
Well, isn't that kind of like with every a character that you play, you have to really kind of think of their background, how they grew up, and you know.
You know, if an author has done his work,
Yeah.
every character you will play will be different, because the author has already done a certain amount of that work. But in terms of prepping it, the prep process is the same, but the facts that you accumulate, the experiences that you accumulate in building a character are fascinating, because they are very different. And finally, I mean, a character is it's all about behavior. What a person's behavior was, what makes their behavior tell their story. We're all real products of our environment and our behavior, and that really is what I think a lot of storytelling is about. And I think a lot of what writers are really writing about, even if you go back to Shakespeare or Chekhov or Tennessee Williams, they're writing about the behavior of people that, in a way, have had an impact on society. That behavior, whether you, it doesn't matter what you watch, whether you watch Sopranos or Big Little Lies. It's about studies in human behavior. People who come from certain environments and their behavior within. And that behavior is their story.
Yeah.
The way they conduct their lives. That's often the brevity of life can be found in a
you
person's
certainly got
behavior.
that down. You got the behavior and the mannerisms of Gatti. You got that down pat. It was pretty amazing. I want to talk about accents and the accent that you did in Bellazaire, right? That Cajun kind of.
That's a warhorse of an accent, actually, because it's French, Southern, West Indian. There's like 5 accents. Canadian, because they're originally from France, and then Canada, and then moved into the deep, deep South. So it's like 5 different accents happening at once. It's a complicated thing. And I actually went to live with them before I made the film. I spent about 5 weeks down there, and it was an amazing life experience. Very religious people. Very religious people. Very, like I said before, God, family, land people.
Yeah.
But that accent is a warhorse.
I'm familiar with it. Yeah, wow. That it is a very particular type of culture of the Cajuns, you know, in the swamp, and they have their own lingo.
Yeah.
You know, the way they even speak
Remarkable
to each
people.
other.
Great people.
Yeah.
I love them dearly.
So how did you actually meet Sylvester Stallone?
Oh, wow, that's going back a ways. I met him originally. I was in doing regional theater. I was in a production of a play by Tennessee Williams. And I was called, before I went to embark on that, I was called by a man named Marty Davidson, ironically, whom I work with many years later. But he said, you know, I'm doing this production. Will you come in and meet with me? And I met with him, and he said, I really have nothing for you, but I would want you to be in this film. I said, well, that's nice. Anyway, I ended up going and I was a wedding guest at a wedding in a film, and I'm not in the film, and my name is misspelled. So it's a myth that I was never in the film. But that was called Lords of Flatbush.
But you were...
And that's the first time I met Sly on that set. Oh. And ironically, that was around 1973. Ironically, 4 years later was the first time in my life I ever delved into the possibility of living and working in Los Angeles. And I got my first job in LA was Kojak, as a guest star on Kojak. And I ran into Sly on the lot of Universal Studios, and he walked up to me and said, I've been looking for you. And just like that, he said, I wrote a film and I want you to play my brother. Ironically, I'll tell you a wild story about that. He wrote Paradise Alley 2 years before he wrote Rocky. And Paradise Alley was turned down by the studio. He then wrote Rocky to compensate for being turned down on Paradise Alley. After he made Rocky, the studio went back to him and said, would you like to make the film Paradise Alley? And that's when we made the film. But a lot of people don't know that story. It's a very powerful story to think about.
That is amazing.
Yeah. He actually wrote Paradise Alley, was turned down, did Rocky, and then they wanted Paradise Alley. It's a sweet film. It's almost like a cartoon. It's inspired by cartoons. A lot of the cinematography that Laszlo Kovacs and Sly did in that is very, very theatrical, very bigger than life. It's a very pretty film to watch, but it's about wrestling, you know. Wonderful group of actors. It breaks my heart that I've lost so many of my friends, actors. I mean, I could think of 4 actors in that film that are gone now. So many actors passed away in the last 10 years. Phenomenal people. Great. Oh, wow. Great company.
So how long was it from when you were in the original, what was it, the Lords of Flatbush?
4 years.
It was 4 years, well, and he remembered you.
Yeah, 4 years.
Wow.
I passed.
Wow.
But, and he's been very lovely to me. In fact, he reached out to me again in the 90s and we did another very, very highly theatricalized cartoon called Judge Dredd. I mean, he's been very, very lovely to me. I have a tremendous, tremendous respect for him as a man and as an artist. Tremendously disciplined athlete. I think everything that Sly does, he does it 1,000%. He's a wonderful person, and I think in a lot of ways, I mean, I think that he knew early on that he was an icon, that he has icon material, and I think he steered his career brilliantly that way. But I think that people forget that the amount of work and discipline that he puts into every project he encounters is phenomenal. Phenomenal person.
And how did that lead into looking for an echo?
So ironically, now that's what, 26 years later, I got a call from Marty Davidson. And he said, I wrote something and I think you would love it. And he sent me this screenplay and it was beautiful. And I wanted to sing in it, but they had already finished the score. So it was done with four of the greatest doo-wop singers in New York ever. Kenny Vance and the Planetones. So the point is that we had the score already intact. So we made the film around the score. It was a very lovely film. Never distributed, but I think it's on Amazon or Netflix. It's a lovely, really lovely film. No, again, no,
so you lip synced
great company.
Everyone had a lip sync in the film.
Yeah, on that one. The other films I sang in Mambo Kings and other films. But the thing is that Marty Davidson was another very, very unsung hero in the movie industry. There's so many people that are unsung in the industry because there's only, you know, there's so many slots at the race for horses. It's the same in the film industry. So there's so many talented directors that never see the light of day. I've been very lucky in that I've been asked to be on juries at film festivals, and I will tell you, sometimes you watch 70 films in 1 week. I mean, I would say 95% of every film at every film festival is never seen again.
Yep.
Ever. So it tells you, kind of gives you the odds of just what a place like Hollywood represents. The odds of having a film actually distributed is almost nil.
Yeah.
The odds, even today, when you get major actors working on independent film, the odds of that film getting distributed today, you will be lucky if you get it picked up by a streaming device like Netflix or Amazon, because they have the world at their beck and call.
There's so much.
Now
There's
the
so
world
much
is descended on Hollywood, for real. I mean, the biggest hit
And
right
things
now
are so easily sold.
the biggest hit on Netflix now is a South Korean project called Squid Game.
Yes.
I was watching South Korean films
heard about
for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Some of the greatest filmmakers in the world. Now they're on Netflix. It's a fact. But I can also tell you film festivals I've been to where there were 5 great South Korean films, never seen again. That's just the reality of it.
I know. I have 3 film festivals, and I get it. You know, I try. I invite distributors, and I try to push it, but they're tough because there's specific things that they're looking for at the time.
Yeah.
You know, maybe what you have at the time, maybe they won't, you know, that's not the time that they're looking for this specific type of film.
That's right.
You know, and they're so busy buying like a lot of horror, lots and lots of horror, right? Horror. They always want horror films.
Yeah. Crazy.
So anybody that wants to make a horror film, you probably get it distributed.
Funny.
So how important is it to find a great script? And why do you think that the writer becomes less important?
I don't necessarily think that a writer becomes less important. I always want to hope that he becomes more important. But the reality of finding a great script is it's very, very rare. Very rare. I've read a lot of writers, and I do every day. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. to find a great story or a great script is the work of years. People have no idea how much time goes into a screenplay because you're dealing with highly essential moments that have to really have tremendous impactful energy behind them. It's not like narrating a story or reading a novel, although I will tell you from my own perspective, reading a book is much more informative to me than reading a screenplay. Unless you're reading a great screenwriter. There are very few, very few. It's a very difficult form to work in. It's almost similar to poetry, to write film well. And I will tell you that I read every day of my life screenplays. And there are very, very few in the course of a year that I would recommend a producer to invest in. It's just a very hard form to work in.
Yeah.
Until you really apply yourself and attempt it yourself, until you really understand the reality of it, you find out and it's very interesting what's happened. Now, I mean, I saw from living abroad for many years, I saw that the world, for real, wanted to be in Hollywood, right? And what's happened, ironically, in America now, the entertainment sector in America is one of the more powerful industries in the world, for real. It's bigger than electronics. It's bigger than it's eclipsed many, many industries. It's fragile. It's fragile as hell, but it's eclipsed many industries because the world now is in Hollywood. But my point is that still, no matter where you are from in the world, I mean, if you're not writing about your culture, however you write, film is a very difficult form to work in. Doesn't matter where you're from, you know, unless you really understand film and how the mechanisms of film work. And I'm not saying to write formula. I'm not saying make it a Marvel film or make it this. No, I mean just the simplicity of storytelling, the simplicity of finding the behavior of each character and breaking it down to something so minimalistic that one line can tell a lot.
Yeah.
5 words can tell a lot if it's impactful. And that's what I mean. To find those scripts, not so easy.
Well, I know as a writer, I'm a writer too. I think that I've been kind of like stifled a little bit with some of the things that I wrote. They're like, no, you're writing too much. That's by giving direction. That's for the director to you know, I'm like, well, how, but I see that. I visualize what's happening. How do I, you know, convey that in a script? So it's difficult. It's very different than writing a novel and you're just able to say everything.
Well, but a novel is a monstrous
Yeah.
undertaking. But I mean, in a novel, you can finesse the poetry of a novel or the literary aspect of a novel. Where in film, I think to write it well, you have to understand, in a way, how sometimes the tiniest moment, the tiniest thing said, can be the most beautiful and impactful and moving thing ever said on film. And that's why, I mean, if you look back on the films you really loved, I'll bet you there are lines that you remember, that you repeat over and over and over, because that one line had such magic to it. And to get that, to write that, to perform that, to find those moments, not simply done, especially on behalf of the writer. That's why I say, you asked me, what is it to find a great script?
Yeah.
It's a long process.
Did you ever feel like you wanted to direct something that you wrote or that you had a hand in writing?
It's funny you ask. I mean, I have written for years, and I've helped both directors and writers. I've been asked to direct a lot. I do not want to direct something that I myself have not written, unless I was so touched and so moved to be able to believe that I want 10 marriages as well as 10 divorces, because when you take on the role of a director, it really is like having potentially 10 divorces. But, and this is the truth. I would only do it if I really was in love with the subject matter. I am working on a project that I wrote. Whether or not it comes to fruition, I will say I put in 5 years on the script alone.
Wow.
So I don't know who I would entrust to direct it, because I know how I want that visually mounted. So I think, a lot of actors are asked to direct. It's a tremendous commitment. And the difference is in performing can take as much as one film can take anywhere from 3 to 7 months, all right, or a year. But when you're directing, it can take 1 to 3 years. If you're a writer, it can take 1 to 10 years. And that's the reality of the business. And if you're a producer, it takes 1 to 10 years. That is a reality.
Wow.
That's not made up. So the commitment is tremendous commitment. I'm working more now with younger directors who have had a tremendous background in MTV, as well as film, as well as a real cultural background in movies, where they really do understand movies. That's very exciting, because some of the younger directors really understand the language of movies and understand the language of cinematography. That's exciting, but I will tell you, in terms of taking on the task of directing, I'd have to look at my schedule. It's a long deal.
Right.
Long haul.
You'd have to really have a lot of passion for something to work on it for that long. All right, let's talk about how important it is to have a great crew, a great team of people and crew that all kind of mesh together.
I mean, if you look at the history of Hollywood at its best, when you had teams like Elia Kazan, who may be working with Tennessee Williams, Bud Schulberg, Orson Welles, Dalton Trumbo, the list just goes on and on. And the point is that these people, all of whom had tremendous literary and historical backgrounds, that's what made the original powerhouse of Hollywood, Hollywood. Because these people were talking about, they were voices for the world. They were voices for the entire world. They were voices for every government in the world. And what was wrong with the world. That's, I think, I liken in a way Hollywood in a way that really is an amazing voice, because it is what the voice of America was before there was motion pictures. People wanted important information. But I'm saying that in terms of what great teams were made of. When Hollywood was at its best, if you look at the mind and the talent that were involved in films like On the Waterfront or Gone with the Wind, or there's so many, but I'm saying there were seminally gifted people, very educated people, whether if they came from the street or they came from an institution. Billy Wilder, one of the most cultivated men on earth. I mean, his ability to put together a story was ingenious. He was a brilliant man. I knew people that knew him personally, and I'm saying that, it counts. It counts. It's the people, and even today, it's the people that make it up. That's what makes it beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a people industry. Background and having an enormous cultural and historical background is a big plus. Today a lot of talent is just university trained. But the background, the cultural perspective may not be there, as we saw in Hollywood of the past. Some of those directors, George Stevens, my God, John Huston, Billy Wilder, so many of these great talents, Elia Kazan. If you take a person like Martin Scorsese. Martin Scorsese is a brilliant person to begin with. His films are based on very thought out metaphors for our society. I mean, he's a brilliant guy. It's that simple. He's a brilliant guy. Forget that he's a director. He's just a brilliant guy, all right? Robert De Niro is a brilliant guy. These are not accidents. I'm saying that people make up this industry. That's what this industry is about. It's about people. And there are moments in your life when you say, gee, I'm working with some supremely ungifted people at this moment. And you're looking at yourself and, what am I doing here? But I mean, it happens.
Yeah.
It happens. More often than you think. It happens. Story of my life.
So how many films do you feel like had that amazing team of and camaraderie of everything that kind of meshed together with all the films that you've worked on? How many films do you think that you really felt like?
Probably. I mean, I want to be fair. I don't want to be unfair. But I had maybe 10 projects that went global. 10.
10.
That
And
went
how
global.
many have you
No,
done?
but I mean that went global. I'm saying I had many films that are very well executed and very commercial and playable. But the thing is, I've also probably had 30 films I never saw. But the point is that, to be truly honest, I had about 10 projects that really went global. And by that I mean, to this day, they're watched every day, every night. So I'm blessed in that. I mean, you have to be careful with what you ask for. You may get what you didn't ask for. It's.
And sometimes you just have to
I
do
never
it.
recommend it. I never recommend it. I never recommend it.
Well, sometimes you just have to pay the bills, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any actor that doesn't know that it's a profession where there's literally no tomorrow. And not only no tomorrow, that tomorrow's going to come, whether you like it or not. And you still have to pay your bills and your family's bills and everybody else's bills. That's the reality of it.
That's the reality.
So I never recommend it.
Well, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get by. So I loved your character in Hoffa. And the scene when Danny DeVito and Cliff Gorman come in. I mean, I was not expecting that. I just watched it again recently, and I was like, "What did he just do in that scene?" You completely turned the whole scene around when they came in. It was brilliant.
That was written by David Mamet, very, very fine writer, and it was a wild experience. Great group of actors, amazing group of actors. Really, really wonderful.
Of course. And comedy. You've done a few comedies, like Fatal Instinct, which I thoroughly enjoyed because I love comedy.
I made that with Carl Reiner, who was
brilliant.
He really, truly was one of the kings of comedy.
Amazing.
So specific in what he wanted every minute. And a lot of people don't realize, but actually, we shot 3 hours of edited footage. So he cut ruthlessly 90 minutes of that film.
Wow.
He cut 90 minutes out of the film.
Well, I'm glad that he
So
didn't cut the red shoe scene.
He wanted his narrative, and he was a brilliant guy. It's ironic, because that film, they didn't push it much at all. And I'll tell you, I was walking down Madison Avenue one day.
In the red shoes? No,
And
I'm
this
kidding.
guy walks up to me, and he says, "I gotta tell you, that was one of the funniest films I've ever seen." And it was Neil Simon. And I thought, wow.
Oh, wow.
That's a nice compliment to get from this guy.
Yes.
So, but Carl was borderline genius in comedy, brilliant. I mean, think of it. I mean, I don't know if Steve Martin, I think he would admit that Carl is a seminal influence in his life, as is Mel Brooks. I mean, those guys, their life was comedy. their whole life. And if you spend time, I spent a lot of time with Carl. In fact, I turned the film down to begin with. I said, I'm not even right for this. Well, why would you want me for this? He said, the reason you're not right for it is why I want you for the film. But anyway, I spent
It was
time,
uncomfortably right.
yeah, but I spent a lot of time with him, and he truly, he lived for comedy. He lived to make you laugh, and remarkable man.
And it was a parody of so many different films. It was, what, Fatal Attraction, Pretty Woman.
Well, it was a satire of almost all the film noir of the 40s.
Of the 40s as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I loved
Double
it.
Indemnity and
Yes.
all those older films.
Hilarious. So you worked on Private Benjamin with Goldie Hawn, directed by Howard Zieff, and written by Nancy Meyer, who went on to write amazing.
She went on to be a major director in Hollywood. Yeah.
Major director.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that was a film that had an amazing team. And you had Goldie Hawn, Harvey Miller, Charlie Shire, Nancy Myers, Howard Zieff, Eileen Brennan. And so many actors.
What names?
Albert Brooks was on it.
Wow.
Harry Dean Stanton. I mean, in terms of the company, it was not only a solid company, it was an inventive company. They were inventors in their own right. And the thing is that, again, it's a film that was no accident. It's a product of a lot of very inventive people. Mm-hmm. An amazing company.
Let's go back to Gatti, the original Gatti, where you were, I read somewhere, I was reading up on Gatti, and I read somewhere that someone wrote that you played Gatti better than Gatti. I love that line. That you just engulfed the character. And it was just shot so beautifully.
Robert Armand is very, very, certainly one of the most underestimated directors in Hollywood. Mm. And it's funny, I was looking him up for other projects, and I noticed that I think he is Tom Selleck's right hand. He's a principal director for almost every project. So he's a remarkable director. And his original film, The Hitcher, which I had seen, is what glued me. I was thrilled that he was to direct that, because visually he understands cinematography in terms of using the camera to really pull the emotion out of the actor. Mm. Brilliant.
I want to thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
For having me here at your home.
That's right. Very sweet.
Your
Thank you.
Gorgeous, amazing, spectacular home.
Thank you very much.
I thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you.